And one of his most zealous supporters said, make me the commander of the raid. And Muhammad said, oh, Abdurrahman, do not seek leadership, because if leadership comes to you unsought, God will be with you in the success of the enterprise. But if it comes to you because you sought leadership, then it's entirely up to you. So that the godly leaders are the ones upon whom leadership has fallen, rather than the ones who claim leadership. And I know of activist groups where they will ask prominent members to simply leave the room while they talk about who should be the leader, because they don't want anyone saying. These are people, incidentally, who are utterly grossed out by American political campaigns. So, if somebody says they're the best person to be president, you should all be shot. What hubris. So that they instead say, well, you wait for leadership to come to you, and then you don't boast of it. You just sort of accept that that is what God or the people have wanted. I remember having a conversation with the sort of the top religious person in Kyrgyzstan, who was the deputy Qadi. The Qadi, the chief judge, was a political appointee, but the deputy Qadi was the real power in the Muslim community. And with a group of Islamic academics, we went around, we had our business cards, this professor so-and-so, there's this graduate students. And then after we had introduced ourselves, he said, well, this is all very, very impressive, and I actually don't have any education or credentials myself. And I said, well, then why are you the deputy Qadi? He said, well, people thought that I had kind of a temperament that would make me good for solving disputes, and so they came to me and they asked me if I'd serve, and so I said, okay, if you want me to, I will. I'll be the deputy Qadi. And then as a conversation went on, it became clear that his grandfather was a Naqshbandi Sufi sheikh who had been exiled for anti-regime activity from the Caucasus. His father was a Naqshbandi Sufi sheikh. He was a Naqshbandi Sufi sheikh. And it's true he had no education, because the Naqshbandis did all their education secretly. He didn't go to the university. But his aura was so greatly increased by saying, I'm nothing, because he was not seeking leadership. And this, among the Shiites, you do have people who have a rank, and that rank entitles them to act like Khomeini or Khamenei or one of the major grand ayatollahs. But among the Sunnis, it's, if somebody claims to be a big deal, it discredits him. And then you have other people who are important, but are kind of invisible. During the hostage crisis, I was at a sort of religiously, involving in a religious dispute in the University of Hawaii, where the Muslim Students Organization had announced within the group that they were going to murder one of the professors who had ridiculed Islam in class. And so they decided to hold a conference to get a clearing of the air between the Muslim community and the religion department. And in order to get money for the conference, they had to have off-islanders. And so two of us flew in we weren't told about the backstory at all. We got there, and one of the people that I met at the time was a Pakistani professor at the University of Hawaii. And he said, I'm so-and-so, and I've had this involvement in this current dispute, but back when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was the Prime Minister of Pakistan, I was the chief Pakistani spy in Washington. And you can check it out. The CIA has a file on me. They know who I am. I'm not spying anymore, but I used to be the top Pakistani intelligence officer there. And what I want to say is that the hostages are being held. And what I would be willing to do, he says there are about 6 people who have enough religious clout that if they collectively went to Iran and spoke to Khomeini and said, you're screwing it up for all the Muslims by what you're doing, so release the hostages. He said, I think that he would pay attention. And I said, well, who are these half dozen people? He said, you would never recognize their names. These are, I mean, they're kind of an old Sufi business of their secret abdals and, movers and shakers of the world who are unknown. But I think there was some truth to that. And he said, can you get the message back to government? So I called friends at the State Department, and then a few weeks later I got a call saying, will you be in your office at this number to get a call from the State Department about your plan? I said, I don't have a plan. I'm just a conduit here. And the call never came. And I think it got up to an action level. And then they decided not to do it because then they would be beholden to this group of people who were trying to intercede with Khomeini. But the fact that the most important Sunni Muslims in the world would be people I'd never heard of. I've heard of a lot of people. That sort of impressed me because I thought that made it likely that it might well be true. So, but with a Khomeini, you have to have the rank, the visibility, the credible claim, and the personal willingness to say, I am the Imam. And there isn't anyone in the Sunni world that I can think of who can do that or would do that and gain any credibility. So I just don't see it happening.
Yes.
Did you say those were 6 Sunni rather than Shia?
My interlocutor was a Sunni. So he didn't say whether they would be Sunnis or Shias, but I assume that they were Sunnis because I can't think that 6 Ayatollahs would take a phone call from a physics professor at University of Hawaii and follow his lead. I think they were Sunnis, but he never specified.
I have a real question. I'm sorry, I can't remember that.
I want to ask one question. You're highlighting the legitimacy question, and in that it's religious legitimacy, protection of the Muslim community, etc. For going forward, do you expect any sort of readjustment in that the Muslim societies around the world might shift or adjust their perspective on the legitimacy question? Maybe it will be something else.
I think that is really the great question. We went through 4 or 5 centuries where imamate was the issue. Then we go through a series of centuries when really being the protector of the Muslim community, of Muslim practice, rather than claiming the imamate is the issue. Now you get up to a point where the constitutions that are going to come about are all going to be pluralist in structure. And the Islamist parties are all now claiming that within certain margins, they accept the notion that pluralism is necessary and that legitimacy is based upon competence to rule rather than some sort of intrinsic thing. So what does that do to Islam? If you have an Islamist party that gains the vote, does it have religious legitimacy, or is it simply a party of people who are personally pious? Within a pluralistic structure, it really can't claim religious legitimacy, and yet it will be seen by many voters as having a religious legitimacy. I mean, let's say if in this country, say Mike Huckabee got elected president, a Baptist minister who's very much a born-again Christian. It would be in a secular state, with a secular constitution, and he'd be a man of faith, and many of his voters, perhaps the majority of voters, would be people of faith. Would he be seen as a Christian ruler, or simply as a president who is a devout Christian who happens to have a cabinet full of devout Christians and so forth and so on. The issue of the intersection of religion and pluralist government, I think, is not has not been resolved anywhere, and the way things are going with the increase of religiosity in a number of different faith communities in the world, the point of definition between a religious regime and a regime of religious people, I think it's going to be an issue we're going to face in the future in one way or another. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out. The other thing that has concerned me is whether Islam, many people think the nation state model is kind of coming apart in some ways. But Islam may be entering a period when the nation state is a significant factor, where you will have something like what happened after the Peace of Westphalia, where Islam within a single state will become operationally the Islam for that national Muslim community, but it may be different from the Islam for the national Muslim community of a neighboring state. This came to mind because I was in Kuala Lumpur. I'm giving the impression I travel around the world all the time. Actually, I hate traveling and do as little as possible. But I was in Kuala Lumpur, and I went to a meeting of the Sisters in Islam, which is a feminist activist group that's quite prominent in Malaysia. And they had invited two imams who had been at the conference I was at. One of them was Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf from New York, and the other was the head of the Council of Ulama of Bosnia. And both charming and eloquent gentlemen. They came and they spoke to these women, and they gave brief, very eloquent statements, and would appreciate their being there, and so forth. And then, almost as if they, hit an on button, the women started to ask the tough questions. So, what are you going to do about child custody? What are you going to do about divorce? What are you going to do about this and that? And these visitors said, well, these are very good questions. You have real problems, and we sure hope that you solve your problems here in Malaysia, because we sympathize with you so much. And then one of them said, a lot of the texts that you need to make the points you want to make are contained in the work of so-and-so, a Syrian writer, and you might look in his works, but don't tell me what I told you about the book. And then the other one said, there was a labor dispute in Bosnia, and a fatwa was issued by what's his name, the famous mufti in Qatar. Qardawi, yeah. And Qardawi issued a fatwa. And so I wrote to Qardawi and said, I'm the head of the Council of Ulama here in Bosnia, and you aren't in Bosnia. You don't issue fatwas dealing with issues in my country. And I realized that these two guys visiting Malaysia did not want to say anything that looked like they were treading on the territory of the mullahs in Malaysia. They have very active fatwa councils in Malaysia. And so they could be sympathetic. They didn't, each country may develop its own, and this could happen easily within a pluralistic system where you do something for the Muslim community, something for the Christian community, something for the Jewish or the Buddhist or the Hindu community. They may each develop a fatwa council or a council of ulama. that is parallel to the state but different from the state, whether the state is a secular party ruling or a religious party ruling, and then legislate what is Islam in that country. I think that this would be a remarkable phenomenon because one of the hallmarks of Islam, of course, is it's been a worldwide community, effectively for 14 centuries, which is absolutely extraordinary. Partly because there's been an institution like the Hajj to bring people together every year. But we could begin to see Islam become more and more a national phenomenon, in which case the question of the relationship of the religion to the government might be one of a negotiation between a quasi-independent religious group. I think France now has a council for Muslims in France, while the state is secular. And it might be that that would be the way Islam would go, which I think would be pragmatically effective, but not necessarily desirable, because I think over time it would lead to a fissioning of the world community. But it's a very difficult question to deal with.
Well, thank you very much. Usually we end our discussions with sort of being either hopeful or pessimistic about the future, but this time around I think we'll just be patient. Thank you so much.
Thank you.